Well, good Monday afternoon, Larry Goldberg. The stock was not doing very well today, but it just slowly but surely crept up, crept up, crept up, only ended up down about $3 and continuing to move up slightly in the after hours. What did you make out of any? I had a video this morning where I gave 8 reasons why it was down. I didn't give any reasons why it might creep back up. So, what, was there anything about the action today that you thought was worthy of note?
Look, the day-to-day action in Tesla is a random walk.
Yeah.
It's the function of who decides to buy and sell on the day. Gary Black always posts out what he thinks is the going to be the action and why it's going to happen.
Right.
It's a random walk. He's often wrong in direction and he's often wrong in amount
But I'm not
because
right. I'm always right.
yeah. I'm saying Gary Black. I mean, because he tries to assign reasons for it. It's a random walk. It's, buyers and sellers positioning themselves. They're buyers positioning themselves for the long, for the medium
Sure.
term, 3 to 5 years out, based upon their belief in Optimus and in FSD and in, embodied AI in general. And the sellers are all getting out of the auto company. And then there's, a few people who are influenced by the energy company. So I would say that the day-to-day action is not really to be considered. I know you make it a big deal, but
So there's, but there's also, Larry, there's also the things that happen that are actually impactful. Like, for instance, today, a thing that would be impactful would be that the president approved the sale of U.S. steel to Nissan and followed that up with a 50% increase in the tariffs for all of the countries. And then Nissan turns around, or U.S. Steel turns around and raises the price of steel. So that's a long-term issue. It impacts the other car companies more than Tesla. They went down 5%. Tesla only went down 3. Do you think that this is going to, other than a one-time factor that's going to be taken into consideration for the cost of the final vehicle, do you think this is important?
no.
Okay. Well, then let's move on then.
Yeah. I mean, the reason it's not important is because it's relative. I mean, all car companies hit the same. From a car company perspective, it may have a 3 cent or 5 cent swing on Tesla's earnings, which don't amount to a hill of beans because Tesla's valuation and share price has little to do with just the car company earnings. So, how much it can impact the car company is, I mean, you couldn't calculate it down to that decimal point.
All right, let's talk about what really, 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 really is important, and that is robotaxi. And
Yeah.
I doubt if anybody thinks that the hardware is the issue at this point. It's all going to be about whether FSD can perform. And
Well,
FS,
that was my day today. I mean, I got into the car and decided to beat the hell out of FSD. I decided to take it into the most difficult spots in the cities around me and some of the most difficult, navigation that I could throw at it. I really wanted to, I've done in this one car, I've done 4,300 miles in, look, I can't speak for the Cybertruck because the Cybertruck, they haven't dialed it in yet. It's not right yet. But I'm talking about the Model 3 and the Model S.
right.
So my Model 3, my brother has a Model S, but I have two Model 3s. My one, the one I drive for the most part, I hammered it today in terms of the most difficult parts of driving in the cities around me. And I spent several hours in the car reaching my destination, punching in a new destination, taking it there as if it were a robo taxi,
Mhm, mhm.
looking for looking for, you know, a reason that it couldn't be running a robo taxi today.
Right.
And honestly, I was a supernumerary in that car. My dog did as much driving as I did on the day. And I am ready. I think we're ready. I really think, and look, I don't think that 13.2.9
Right.
is the version that they're rolling out.
No, no.
And I think that's why the date is not yet certain. I had some conversation with some people today, and Tesla are not locked into the date of the 12th. So
Okay.
I think, we shouldn't put too much store by the date of the 12th at this point. But I do think that 13.2.9 is ready for robotaxi service. I'm just waiting to hear what, the date and what the rev number for the service will be. But I'm comfortable.
Yeah, so without giving anything away, I'll just say that I know from conversations with Larry that he has a little bit of inside knowledge here. Larry, would you think it could be sooner than the 12th, or are you saying it might be later than the 12th?
It might be later.
Might be later than the 12th. Are you talking about a lot later, a little later? You don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong directionally, but that would be my guess. I mean, the 12th is like, not much more than a week away.
Anyway, I know it's 10 days away. Yeah.
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 So that's why I'm guessing that probably the 12th is probably going to be a little bit later. That's my guess.
That's your guess. Okay. All right. And then when you were doing this ride and you said you were, as useful as your dog, were there
Who was enjoying the ride, by the way? She had a great time. Yeah.
Great time. Yeah. So were there any particular kinds of tests that you put it to that you were like shocked that it was able to actually do as well as it did?
Yeah, some of the cities around here, Raleigh and Durham, have some pretty nasty, they're old tobacco towns. Oh, well, Raleigh was a capital, but Durham is an old tobacco town with tobacco warehouses and
Hmm.
what used to be the railway tracks between them and the lanes between, the wagon trails between them has now been turned into roads. So it gets awfully crazy. And around rush hour, it really does get a little crazy. And the freeways are very, very old that run through Durham and that actually run through Raleigh, and so they don't have the width and it's a little bit like your freeway that goes the old one,
The Pasadena Freeway.
Pasadena Freeway, a little bit like that. And so, I put it to the test. I took it to really difficult places. I put in also quite a few destinations that were in old tobacco warehouses where the road winds around the warehouse and then there's this huge parking lot and you have to go a certain way. One way or another, I set like, I don't know, a dozen destinations.
Yeah.
As if I were, being picked up at this particular launch point and going to this destination, and then being picked up at that destination and going to another destination. Railway station, and the railway stations here are, really old wagon stops.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was, it was like perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
As we get closer and closer. Today, on a video that'll be out tonight after you at 7:45, Brian White and I were discussing possible additional revenue sources for FSD. And we were brainstorming on that because, there are things like delivery pickups of different kinds.
Absolutely.
And so we added to that list somewhat. So a very interesting video for those of you who want to listen to that at 7:45 California time. Larry, one of the ones that popped up though, which Grok came up with, which I hadn't really contemplated, would be and I'm surprised maybe the Tesla isn't already doing this, is the sale of the data. So we have this real world data that nobody else has, that's significantly more real world than anybody else's data. And one of the things that Grok recommended was selling it to the cities where the vehicles are being driven. So they would know right away if there's a light out or an accident or a pothole or all these kind of things way faster than they could learn it now. But then the data would also be valuable to companies that are just trying to accumulate data for their large language models or other kinds of models that they're developing. What do you think?
Yeah, that may come down the road. I think right now, the data is far too valuable
Mhm.
for them to share, and they are, I think they've got their hands full. They've
Yeah.
got their hands full. So down the road, it could well be uh, you know, I think using the data for real world applications is going to be far more valuable than selling it to somebody else who's going to do it for that purpose. That
Well,
would be my general view.
yeah, but I mean, if it's not something they're going to do, if they're going to if somebody's got a robot that is a completely different use case, like underwater welding or something like that. Now,
How's their data going to help
no, I
that?
know. Okay. That was a bad example. How about, I don't know, just any kind of factory work, but it's a short.
Well, the idea of the quality of the roads is interesting, but I don't think we take, that's an interesting question as to how much of the road surface they actually do map by, yeah, I guess they do because I know that on the X they actually regulate the height of the
Mm,
truck
mm,
depending on, what the road surface is like. So they do have that,
mhm.
and that could well be valuable. Yeah, that's possible.
All right. Well, moving over to the general economy, which I love to talk to you about. There was been a number of different. Oh no! Before we do that,
Yeah.
we were talking about the B2G video the other day. You were talking about the part of that conversation with Brad Gurley talking about the Delaware, I guess the Delaware courts. So was there,
Yeah.
like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually have a video that'll be dropping tomorrow with Farzad, where I discuss that at great length. I think it's clear to me. I mean, one of my findings from the data that Brad presented, and more importantly, the paper that the professor he references wrote, is that I think it's quite clear that there is a very clear that there is an attempt to implement policy at a judicial level, to promulgate policy at a judicial level that is, people have called it activist, but it seems to be that it is significantly stacking the court against companies on behalf of shareholders in this activist fashion.
Hmm.
And what the paper that Brad Gurley focused on does is show that the courts, upon the arrival of these two activists, the chancellor and the vice chancellor of the Chancery Court of Chancery in Delaware, upon their arrival, the awards, legal fee awards, which had always been in the 2 to 3 times the normal rate award,
Okay.
between 1 and 3 times the normal rate award for the winner, had jumped to now it's in the 10 time, almost normalized at 10 times.
Wow.
And they had attempted to say that, the federal courts wouldn't be aghast at that. And then, what this professor, the professor that Brad Gurley quoted, points out that no, they would be aghast because this is so out of the norm. There are only 0.023%, 0.023% of federal cases that ever give that level of award. So yeah, the federal judges would be aghast at that level of award, but they become normalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, the key the key learning there is that the judges are awarding the legal profession for pursuing these cases
Yeah.
far out of proportion to that which is done at the federal or any other state level. So you have to ask yourself why. You know, who benefits?
Yeah.
Cui bono. The finding in my head, were I a judge, you know, God forbid, but were I a judge, the finding in my head would be the lawyers benefit.
Right. And the state gets revenue from their income taxes.
Well, the state does, but not all the lawyers are from the state of Delaware, but for sure. Now the question is, why? Why? Who benefits? The lawyers. Who's doing this? Two judges. The judge who sits as the chief judge, you know, and then they call it the chancellor in that court, and then the second in command. Those two guys, between them, are personally responsible for this crazy change.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there doling out what is a munificent amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars.
And why?
Why? And more importantly, cui bono. Who is benefiting?
Yeah.
This is corruption at the highest level. Anyway, lesson is get the hell out of Delaware.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of laws, the Congress has developed a law with regard to how the DOT, the Department of Transportation.
Correction.
Correct.
They've developed a bill.
A bill, I'm sorry. A bill, yes. Okay, all right. They developed a bill, which they'd like to pass into law.
Yes.
That would direct the Department of Transportation as to how they're to deal with ride-hail services, I guess the licensing of companies to be able to offer ride-hail services that are automated in the United States. And I had a brief chance to look at the headlines. You said you at least got to read the summary. Tell us what you thought.
I thought that, like all bills these days, it isn't sufficiently prescriptive. It leaves the whole program up to the administrator, the Secretary of Transport. So in general, I think this whole business of writing laws that simply put the onus on the executive to develop, you know, administrative laws that are then going to be administered, I think is a really bad idea. I think laws should be much more prescriptive, and then the regulations should be far less and far simpler and far less, you know, onerous and pressing and detailed. Having got over my hang up, I think it's a good thing. I just don't know what the chances of passing it in this Congress are.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Now, short of passing it, the Department of Transportation could still promulgate rules with regard to these vehicles.
I think so.
They have been.
I think they could, yeah.
They might.
Kind of points to the redundancy of Congress in the first place, but okay.
Yeah. Exactly. That's right. In this particular case, it would. So it came up in a conversation the other day. My understanding of the law generally, and my understanding of this in particular, because the secretary said it the other day, is that even the DOT now, and certainly with this bill, they would be controlling with regard to the states.
It's interstate commerce. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They could do set-asides, allowing the states to be more restrictive, but in general, they'd be controlling.
Listen, Randy, here's the reality.
Okay.
The Interstate Commerce Clause, the ICC, has now pervaded our lives to such a degree that these federal bureaucrats can pretty much do whatever they want. You know, everything's become federalized today.
Yeah.
The states are just another layer in this, layer cake of bureaucracy, and they are just, subject to the women fancy of the federal layer. So I think that it's just it's a formality for but Congress passing a law like this would be kind of amping up the priority, would be forcing the priority to get to a given date. So that would be the value of it.
Yeah, I can tell you that the Interstate Commerce Commission was already pretty much all that powerful while I was in law school because it was a big part of what we studied in constitutional law was the power of the Interstate Commerce Commission.
And since that time, it's become
Even
very much more powerful.
and that was in 1970, Larry. So
Yeah. So today, I mean, you can't breathe without, something to do with interstate. I mean, the air that you breathe out crosses state lines, I'm sure, within a couple of days.
all right, let's talk to the general economy. So
Oh, yeah.
this morning, I was reading a few folks who were commenting on the general economy. So Goldman Sachs now has revised their thinking. They believe that the S&P can hit 6,500 by year end. Tom Lee was already bullish a week ago. He was already saying 6,600 on the S&P. He confirmed that again either yesterday or this morning on the CNBC. Very bullish about the general economy and very bullish about the Russell 2000. He feels like the smaller companies will finally get a shot. Um, and then you and I have been listening to All In and the others. What are you feeling at this point? Do you agree with my assessment that there's not that we're not going to? Oh, I guess one of the other stats that came out this morning was the Atlanta Fed says that we're running at about 5.8% GDP increase right now, but you got to pull out that same 2.5 that made the first quarter negative. But even if
Yeah.
you pull that out, you're still talking about a 3% GDP
3.7, yeah.
already in the second quarter, much less the third and fourth quarter. Is the golden age going to be here in the fourth quarter, like Randy's been saying?
Well, if this is a repeat of Trump 1, this is the pattern. This is definitely the pattern. I mean, Trump 1 it's almost an exact duplicate right now because we had that enormous burst right after the election. Then there was this sort of, oh my God, what's happening? And then boom. So it's quite possible. I think that I haven't seen evidence of the velocity of money increasing.
Mm.
So that's kind of a negative.
Hmm. Hmm.
The money supply is being, throttled somewhat by this problem with the bonds.
Hmm. Hmm.
But generally, there's kind of a bullish vibe. Everybody talks about a vibe now. You can't get away without talking about a vibe, but I think there's a bullish vibe.
Okay. All right. Um,
I think, look, there's a war on. There's a
yep.
major war on.
Right.
It's unclear what's going to happen on that war. Could get into really bad. Who knows? Who knows what happens with Iran? I mean, Trump is telegraphing that he's good with Iran, that everything's fine, that we're going to make a deal. I don't think that's going to be that easy. I think they're going to sidle out of this. They're very good at it. We'll see.
So part of you brought up the bond issue. Goldman Sachs says, they think that the bonds are going to be stuck at 4.5 for the rest of the year, and they don't care.
Well, 4.5% bond is not the end of the world. If we didn't have such an enormous deficit, it would be normal.
Yeah.
The problem is it is normal, and people are going to be very chary about buying a bond at 4.5% when the debt is at 1.7 trillion. Sorry, the deficit is at 1.7 trillion. Now, if Trump actually engineers a major change in that dynamic of growth versus deficit, could be very good for the country.
Yeah.
But time will tell.
Time will tell. So you and I have been talking about rescission. I think you were maybe the first one to mention the word rescission, maybe 4 months ago. And so then everybody had to look it up and find out what that meant and what it meant legally and everything else. So rescission now is front and center. Everybody was talking about rescission over the weekend. We've got a $9 billion rescission bill that's going to go to Congress. And the way I understand it over the weekend is that if the $9 billion goes through, then we would get many other rescission bills and or one big rescission bill or something. How confident are you that the Republicans have been chastened enough by Johnson and Gingrich and Graham and others and the bond market to the point where they know that they really need to do what Doge set out to do?
Yeah, rescission is an idea whose time has come. And I think, Congress will work very hard to get there. If we seriously get rescission, if we get a budget bill and then a rescission, and we're able to carry through on some of these Trump initiatives in terms of reshoring a lot of our industry, that's the Goldilocks scenario. In my lifetime, I haven't had many Goldilocks scenarios. I will say that the latter half of Reagan's administration, the latter third of Clinton's administration, those were the Goldilocks periods that I can recall. Those were the Goldilocks periods. And nothing much equaled them. I would say that it's 50-50. This is an extraordinary president. He's so hated. He is so vilified. He is so castigated by those, slightly left of center and onward and leftward, that it's very, troubling and disturbing. I mean, I can see it. His personality is not normal for a president.
But he has a 53% rating as of this morning.
Yeah.
And the right way, wrong way is at 50%. 50% for right way, historic. I mean, it's never, ever been that high.
But the better, the more successful he gets, the more angry the opposition gets, the more extreme they get. And we have people now shooting people for political reasons. I didn't remember that being a norm, but it's almost become a norm. And they're shooting people because they're Jews, and they're shooting people because they don't fly to a Palestinian flag. Things are not normal at the moment. So that's my concern.
Okay. So talk about things that are kind of that transition didn't work at all. But when they don't work, Larry, and I don't have an editor, I just have to eat the transition. Okay. So one of the things that did come up out of the, I think it was in the All In podcast, I thought was extremely interesting. Maybe it was B2G. But anyway, they talked about this idea. Okay. All right. Here's how I should start this. I'm going to start for the third time. The other big thing that popped over the weekend was after months and years even of all the tech giants, all the people that are in AI saying the only jobs that were in danger were boring, repetitious, dangerous, dirty. Those were the only jobs that were of concern. This weekend, two or three different tech giants came out and said, oh, no, no, no. We're talking now about 50% of the white collar jobs are going to be gone in the next 3 years. It's going to be a huge transition that we're going to have to go through. And I thought, I think it was All In that said, if that happens, then the wealth that will be generated as a result for the companies, the earnings that will be generated, and the wealth that will be generated for the population as a whole will create all the jobs you can possibly think of in order to replace, find work for them. I thought that was a great way of stating it. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but then,
But that's classic economics.
Classic economics. Yeah.
I mean, you add that level of wealth.
Yeah.
If you add that level of wealth, I'm a little bit more skeptical than that, but were you to add that level of wealth, that amount of money has to find its way into something. And that thing is, more of X and more of Y and more of Z. Somebody has to create the more of X and the more of Y and the more of Z. And so, you get this expansion of the economy because X and Y and Z have value. All the profits have, all of this arises in value. I mean, this is as old as time itself. As long as man has been around, and when they lit the first fire, it wasn't the end of civilization. It was the beginning of civilization. When they started smelting iron, it wasn't the end of civilization. It was the beginning of civilization. When they made the first wheel, it wasn't the end of civilization. It was the beginning of civilization. Similarly, all these great discoveries, lead to the expansion. I'm going back 50 years, but I can tell you, and maybe not even 50 years, maybe 30 years, I can tell you that we were told by a Harvard professor with long hair and with great certainty that the world was going to run out of food.
Yes, right. 100%.
We were all going to starve to death. And the world could not support 2 billion people.
Right.
Too many people. The phone books have become too thick. How many people are there now? Yeah. 9 billion. And now we're worried about, guess what? The population's going to decline. I mean, they've been amongst us for years, for centuries. The naysayers, the doomsayers, they've been amongst us for centuries, and mankind just keeps powering upward. Now, what worries me is, the woke. But okay,
yes, that's a whole other story.
Yeah. We'll survive even them.
So there's a million ways that you can think about this, Larry. I always like to think of it in terms of vacationing. And when you and I would vacation 50 years ago, you go to, let's say the great city of Venice, Italy.
Yeah.
And it might be a little crowded on certain days, but other days it really wasn't that crowded. You could kind of just get into Venice anytime you want. Now, because of this wealth factor, because we no longer have secretaries, we no longer have very many line workers, we no longer have, so many jobs that used to exist that no longer exist. You go to Venice and they're talking about limiting the number of people that can get into Venice on any given day. You go to New Orleans and they're talking about charging people $1 to go on what's that? I forget the name of the street, the famous Bourbon Street. Yeah, they're going to charge you $1 to go on Bourbon Street so they can reduce the amount of people that are jamming together.
They'll have to charge $5 to even make a dent.
Right. So there's always going to be something that if I'm spending $2,000 a month on my rent now, and because my wealth impact lowers my rent to $1,700, I got $300 a month to spend on something. And that might be a vacation to go see Bourbon Street.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Look, the more crowded the world becomes, the more competitive it becomes. And, we sit here speaking in the West. Go to Thailand. Try and drive through Bangkok. I mean, go to, some of the great cities of China or even Tokyo. I mean, people in the United States have no clue how gigantic these cities are.
Yeah, yeah.
Tokyo is like
and modern.
and modern. Yeah, well, they were all built more recently. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've been to Japan and Seoul and Singapore just in the last 4 years, and those three cities are more clean, modern, and well policed than anything in the United States.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. All right, so gosh, there was another point off of that, but it's gone. So I won't try to resurrect it. What else? Did you hear anything else out of any of these podcasts over the weekend, Larry, that struck you in terms of, more or less the general economy? I think that's we've got the budget, the big, beautiful budget bill coming. We've got these tariffs. Were there other things that impacted you?
I think that, for me, the rolling recession of last year and into the early quarter of this year was the key issue. Are we seeing it roll back? Are we seeing the property market, the commercial property market? Are we seeing some of these sectors of the economy that were so badly disjointed? Are we seeing more permanent jobs? Are we seeing a return to normalcy? I don't think we're seeing that yet. I think we detect opportunities for that, but I think the risks are also very high. And there's a lot of I think there's a lot of uncertainty, more uncertainty now than there's been for a long time, because Trump engenders uncertainty. He uses uncertainty as a tool of certainty.
Right.
And so we had as many opinions as there were people giving opinions. Bill Gurley. I always get Brad Gersten and Bill Gurley. Yeah. I shouldn't, because Bill Gurley's the giant.
Right, right.
He seemed in as many minds as I am, which is two, about the direction. But everybody in our orbit seems to be quite hopeful of what Trump will bring. And despite the uncertainty that he engenders, there's a certain comfort in having him in this feisty state. So I think we're in a very, very interesting moment. And I keep going back to what I said at the beginning about, the parallels to the first Trump administration. I mean, if we end this Trump 4-year term as we were going to end the first Trump term, sans the pandemic, I think we'll be in very good shape. In other words, if we get to year 2 in the shape that we were in year 2 of the first Trump term, that'll be, the best possible outcome for us.
Well, brainstorming on the fly, I'm thinking about what Tom Lee said. I'm thinking about what you just said. And I'm thinking about the fact that I'm always talking about the durables. And, I think that's what will lead us, because we got the 5 categories that we've talked about so often, Larry, that fell behind. If you've got people that are saving right now, that's what we saw last week in the numbers. People were earning so much more and they weren't spending as much. They were putting money in savings. They're not borrowing. We'll see the credit card numbers this week. But at some point, people are going to need to buy that refrigerator. When the durables move out, that will help transportation. If you got the durables help, and that will help manufacturing, of course, because that's where you get your durables. So if durables lead manufacturing up and then transportation gets up because you got to move those things.
And what comes before all of those things?
What comes before all of those things?
Spending, consumer spending.
Well, but that's consumer spending on durables is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but consumer spending is what leads to all of those good things.
Right.
And consumers have been holding their hands in their pockets because of inflation. So if we see, falling inflation, if we see rising incomes, if we see stabilization of employment, not just part-time employment, because people are not going to buy durables if they're part-time. If we see all of that change in course of action, then I think we'll see the other thing. And the other thing is the domestic property market, the private property market, residential property market, I guess it's called in this country. If we see the residential property market tick up, and right now it's ticking down,
Yes.
but if we see that tick up, I think that will be, what bursts the dam wall.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might take a minute longer because I think they'll be looking for the mortgage rates to come down in addition to the certainty. But they may not see those mortgage rates come
I
down.
don't see the mortgage rates coming down for a very long time. I think this is normal. I think these mortgage rates are not abnormal from a 50-year cycle point of view. We just became used to 𝐬𝐝, and 𝐬𝐝 is a really, 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 really bad thing.
So I'm thinking building homes, building apartments is probably a 2026 item, whereas I think the durables could still pick up yet in this year. That's a theory. That's an idea.
Well, durables often follow residential homeowner growth, but not necessarily lead.
That's true, except
But it's possible in this case. Yeah.
I think what I'm talking about is what would you call it? The built up demand for just normal replacement is what I'm thinking is likely to take place. All right. Any other thoughts, Larry, before we look at the numbers?
No, let's look at the numbers.
Okay, let's look at the numbers. So we said earlier that Tesla was moving ahead in the after hours. It is now up 51 cents in the after hours. Actually, we've gone past. No, we're not at 5 o'clock yet, right? Are you at? No, I'm having to add 6.
Yes, 5:48. You mean 6? Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually have to look at. I have to look at the other guy. I have to look at Robinhood. Robinhood is slow. Come on, Robinhood. Okay. Up 46 cents. All right. So still 343.16. That I think I'm happy with the result today. I think it's giving us a directionality for tomorrow that could be we could continue this rally and see if we can break through 365 for good. Rest of the market, just really quickly, was all up at the end of the day. Dow up 35, NASDAQ 128, S&P 24, Magnificent 7, except for Google, and I don't know why, was all slightly up. Oh, what was this? Wait a minute. What am I looking at here? Meta was up 23 today.
Really?
Yeah, that is 3.62%. Yeah, Meta was up 3.62%. I wonder what that was about.
I don't know.
I don't.
I don't follow.
They did announce an agreement with Palantir to make a new military product with a helmet with the.
Oh, but that happened last week. We knew that last week.
Okay, so that's not. But it was after hours, after close? I don't know. Anyway.
No, I don't think it was after close. Well, maybe.
Okay. So anyway, don't know why Meta was up. Kathy Woods basically up except for TDoc. So yeah, overall, everybody was doing good today. Except for Tesla, which ended up just a little down. after being way down. So bonds, Larry, though,
By the way, that Meta deal wasn't with Palantir, it was with Anduril.
Anduril, I knew that. Yeah, so that
That's very that was a very interesting deal, and I listened to the Anduril founder, talk at length about his deal with Meta, because it was really strange, because he was thrown out of Meta for political reasons.
right. Lucky Palmer, yeah.
Yeah, and he was thrown out of Meta for political reasons.
Yeah.
He founded the company called Oculus that Meta bought, and it's the basis of their, so far not really successful, headgear stuff. But Anduril have wrested a $20 billion deal from Microsoft, taken over from Microsoft. Microsoft failed on it.
Right.
And Meta actually approached, Anduril actually approached, which is incredible, because
Yeah.
Palmer, like, he had been thrown out of Meta, but they made up, and Palmer has brought them into that deal. But that deal is not going to move the needle for them.
Okay.
Anything like 20 points on the, but maybe, who knows?
Okay. All right. I thought that's interesting. Okay. Let's see. Then you have got okay, the bonds. So the bonds going absolutely the wrong way, up 2.4 basis points, back up to 4.44. I'm going to guess that's because Goldman said they're going to be 4.5 for the rest of the year. So
Yep.
that is probably what happened there. Oil went up $2.25, Larry. They're claiming that's because some of the rigs in the US have been quieted. They have been taken offline because the price is too low, and that happens.
Yeah.
Natural gas, maybe for some,
Trump has been too successful.
yes, too successful. Natural gas, maybe for similar reasons, up 8.62%. Just remind me, Larry, never, ever, ever to play natural gas. That is the craziest market.
I mean, you have to be a trader to actually do that deal, to get involved in those deals.
It makes Tesla look flat and it's not volatile at all. Your gold market is going the wrong way too, Larry. This is, you were doing so well. It went up today by 91 bucks, 2.7.
Wow, that's a leap.
And silver up by 5.76%.
That's huge.
Almost to its all-time high. It's at 34.93.
Wow.
When I say all-time high with an asterisk, of course, because it was at 38.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trading scandal.
The Hunt brothers.
Hunt brothers, yes.
They cornered the market in silver.
Right. If they tried to, it cost them a fortune. Copper up 3.86%. Man, the metals are really up. Copper up 3.86%, almost to $5. So I'm going to be doing some research on that overnight.
The question is, does that hit our
inflation numbers? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the big the big
All
concern.
of those. Oil going up, natural gas going up, gold going up, copper going up, steel going up. Yeah, all of those would be potential hits to inflation. Dollars up a little bit in the pre-market. Bitcoin down 221, 105, 104, 888.
Do you think it drops below 100?
So somebody, who was that? I think it might have been Brad. The other day we were talking about it, and we talked about maybe having to come down 50% of its gain. So from 70 to 110, so take away 20, be 90. So it might have to what's that? Yeah.
Retrace is the word.
Retrace, that's the word. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah.
Old men helping one another. It's nice. Sorry, I did that with wine, and that was not kind of me. Okay, the pre-market. Wait a minute. Where's the equities? What happened here? My equities just went south on me. What's wrong with the app here? No, it's still showing. Okay. Do you have visibility, Larry, on the equities for the pre-market?
Hold on. Markets, pre-market. Yeah, I do actually. Pre-markets. Dow, S&P 5940, which is unchanged.
Okay.
And futures in industrials, Dow is unchanged.
Well, that's what I'm showing. I'm showing unchanged in all three. That's impossible.
Yeah.
That can't be. That's so they've got a glitch. They've got a glitch. So I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we are unable to tell you what the pre-market is on the equities right now. There's some kind of a
Everything's showing unchanged. Wait a minute. Fair value futures is up at 1.3. Fair value futures are, they're showing a slight gain.
slight gain. Okay.
Yeah, slight gain.
All right.
Very slight.
A very slight gain. Okay. Okay, Larry, I just want to use a minute of your time to remind people that I did put up that video, the 4 video series that I did last weekend, that I put it all together in one 1.5 hour video. If you'd like to watch it, I will put a card for that right up here. That shows the combination of Trump versus Elon Musk versus AI versus embodied AI. All of those coming together in one moment in time that is going to bring us to the golden age, which Larry and I just discussed. If you'd like to watch that video, again, I'll put the card up for that right there. Already mentioned that Brian White will be up at 7:45 in California time. And Larry, last, you know what? I've got you. We got it. So far, you've always been able to come through for me. So closing wisdom.
Closing wisdom. That's an interesting question. It's not as if it's unexpected, right? And I had picked out an idea, but I'm an old man, so it's come and gone. I think, the only thing I can suggest to everybody is two. Actually, I'll give you 2 today.
Wow.
The first is don't form your company in Delaware. And if you have a Delaware company, Dexit. Get out of there.
Exit.
Number one. Particularly if you're a small startup, because if there's any legal issues, you're faced with the most expensive lawyers in the world. And my second piece of advice is never buy shares on margin.
All right.
That is financial advice.
That is financial advice, absolutely. And life advice.
And sue me for it.
Okay. I'm sure they will, Larry. You
Yeah.
might have deep pockets. Larry, as always, I am so thankful to have you on Mondays and Fridays, and this week on Saturday too, because it'll be Kathy Wood.
Good. Yeah.
It's going to be, man, what's she going to say?
No, I don't know. I think, Kathy's going to be optimistic.
I think so.
I think she sees the vibe going the way of, up and to the right. So we'll see.
All right, Larry, thanks again. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.